San Francisco is known for its bridges, its skyline, its weather, and an impending sense of doom. In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake struck, and more than 60 people died, more than 3,000 people were injured, and around 12,000 people were displaced. Some people remember exactly where they were that day, and others were not even born yet. Whether or not you were born or have experienced an earthquake or not, everyone can admit an earthquake is a destructive force, and you better be prepared for it. I personally was born after the Loma Prieta earthquake, but I spent lots of time in San Francisco during the years shortly after, and I would ask my grandma when I would stay at her house for 2 or 3 days a month, and I would ask her, why are there so many cracks on the sidewalk? Why does the freeway go to nowhere? And why is everything under construction? And the answer was always, because of the earthquake. The Loma Prieta was a major landmark event showcasing exactly how major cities in the United States can handle such an earthquake, and particularly how a volatile city such as San Francisco can handle it. And in this topic, in this speech, we're going to discuss how did they prepare, what actually happened during the Loma Prieta earthquake, and what's been done since. There's an upcoming earthquake called the Big One, right? But Loma Prieta was not it. The anticipation, however, was growing for a long period of time. In fact, after 1906, there had been no earthquakes for 80 years, and 1906 was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake, which caused absolute havoc and fires and much destruction in a city that wasn't even completely built yet, as it is now. Yet, 80 years before that, there had been many earthquakes before the 1906. But on the other hand, 2 years before the 1989 earthquake, there was many 5.0 magnitude earthquakes in the San Francisco-San Andreas fault line area. So many buildings, however, were not built up for earthquakes prior to the 1989 earthquake. In fact, the Golden Gate Bridge was considered the most dangerous bridge in the city even after the earthquake, even though it did not get damaged. And they started retrofitting that in 1997, yet it's still not complete as of now in 2020. The Bay Bridge was built in 1936, but they were more concerned about high winds than they were about earthquakes. And that leads us to the fact that what actually happened during the Loma Prieta earthquake, because they were well aware of the possibility of the havoc that was going to happen from an earthquake, but they didn't know exactly when. But when Loma Prieta struck, it caused tons of carnage and chaos. The freeways broke, fires started, and structures collapsed. 366 businesses were destroyed, 11,000 homes were destroyed, and the Nimitz Freeway collapsed, killing 42 people, as well as the Bay Bridge, upper half on the east side, collapsed on top of the lower half, the lower part, and that only killed one person, fortunately. Santa Cruz also suffered. Santa Cruz and surrounding areas suffered lots of damage as well. And Santa Cruz in particular, in their downtown area, 6 people died, as well as many buildings downtown were destroyed. And not enough was done to prevent all this, because the marina in San Francisco was built on soft soil, which caused gas lines to break, starting fires, and on top of that, many buildings collapsed because of that soft soil. Also, apartments in San Francisco built with what's called a soft story structure. And this means that there's a giant ground level of parking garage which causes buildings to collapse during such earthquake events. And so preparation is starting to happen finally. But is it enough? The big one is still to come, and it's going to be an 8.0 to an 8.2 earthquake. And if scientists are right, then the East Bay has been redone and it's safe now because it has one giant tower with cables that hold it, and it has the ability to sway whether it's high winds or an earthquake. But in 2016, it was found that the Millennium Tower, a structure that was recently built and definitely should be totally earthquake proof, had sunk 16 inches into the ground on one side, giving the tower a definite lean, which if their scientists thought it was good enough and their engineers thought that was good enough, it leads you to wonder how good any building really is in the Bay Area. On top of that, many buildings such as the Transamerica Pyramid, as well as the Chevron Tower, were construction with flawed welding techniques. And Ron Hamburger, a seismic engineer, he says collapse is probable. But the Loma Prieta earthquake really could have been much worse. It taught many lessons about how San Francisco holds up against major earthquakes. And as new structures are built and old ones torn down, San Francisco might feel safer as time passes, but the big one marches on closer and closer. Thank you for listening.